Hey everybody, this is Charlie Dobbins, and this is the next lesson in the Masterclass Elite Group Coaching Call series. This is actually going to be kind of a repeat. Some of you heard it a couple of weeks ago, but we had technical difficulties with the recording, and it was such a great call. We have to record it again so that everybody can get a chance to listen to it, and it goes into our archives, and everybody gets to hear it. So I've been asked by many people about how do you start your own property management business, and because as you know, how I teach many of you is that you may start off in this business using a third-party property management company, but as you start to grow in this business and you start adding more properties, you will definitely own your own property management company. You will be your own back shop because, as I say, nobody loves your baby more than you do. And you'll find that out by working with third-party management companies. So I decided to have this repeat conference call with my accountant, my property accountant, who is the back shop for not only my properties, but for many companies just like mine throughout the country, and so you can see exactly how it operates, so that when the time comes for you to start your own property management company, you'll be able to know exactly how to do it. So as usual, as I always say, as required by the Massachusetts Bar Council's office, I am here to inform you that I am a lawyer. I am not your lawyer, so get a lawyer. And as I am now saying, folks, lawyers love LegalZoom. LegalZoom, is great if you're looking to just set up an LLC or very simple documents that involve you and maybe your family. But if you are looking to do deals with partners, if you are looking to go out there and raise private money, do not cut corners with an organization like LegalZoom. Make sure you hire a good attorney who knows what they're doing, who specializes in that particular field, and spend the money to do it. It'll be money very well spent. And then also it'll really raise the bar on your business. I mean, if you're out there looking to ask people for money to invest in your deal, and they see that you're cutting corners with the likes of a LegalZoom, right away you've got some bad faith going on, not bad will, not goodwill, but bad will going on with your investors, and you just don't want to start off that way. So don't cut corners with lawyers. All right, so meet my property accountant, Mr. Jeffrey Ecker of In Focus Property Services. Jeffrey, hello.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, Jeff. Jeff is actually, I can actually hear an echo on Jeff's line, and it's not a technical echo. It's actually the fact that he's actually on the other side of the wall from me right now. So that's how close our businesses are to each other. Now, Jeff's company is In Focus Property Services. Jeff, give us an idea of exactly what your business does.
Sure, Charlie. Happy to. In Focus Property Services was put in place. I started this business about 9 years ago for the sole purpose of being the outsourced accounting infrastructure for owners who self-manage their properties and for property management companies who want to focus on their business, what they're really good at, and outsource the accounting and finance function to somebody else. So we do that for owners and property managers in about 25 states right now, pretty much across the country. And we probably have about 2,500 apartment units, residential units that we do, and several million square feet of commercial space that we do as well.
All
right,
that's
now, sort of the big picture.
Now, when you and I met, you hadn't even started In Focus Property Services. You were an investor yourself.
That's correct. I got into this business. I was investing in commercial real estate, and my biggest issue was the horrible quality of financial information that I was getting from the property managers who were overseeing the properties I was an investor in. My career started back in the 80s as a CPA with one of the big 5 accounting firms, so I know how it's supposed to be done, and I saw the information coming out of it, out of the properties I was invested in, and I pretty much knew that I could do it better. Because it just wasn't acceptable to myself. It wasn't acceptable to my partners. We didn't know what the property was doing. We didn't know what the property manager was doing with our cash. and it was a real challenge to properly oversee the property. So that's why we started the business.
Yeah, and I remember when you and I sat down the first time and talked. I think it was right after I had spent about $6,000 with my tax accountant cleaning up the books of my property accountant, my property management company, in order to be able to do the tax returns, do the K-1s for all my investors. They had done such an atrocious job of managing the books that it cost me so much more money at the end of the day just to get my books squared away. And these are expenses that when you're looking to buy the property, you don't even take it into consideration until it becomes a problem.
Oh, that's correct. I mean, most property managers, their accounting function is really nothing more than tracking a checkbook. They really don't know accounting. They don't really care about doing it in a quality manner. Their focus is on leasing and work orders, and make sure the grass is mowed and the light bulbs are changed out in the hallways and the common areas and the utilities are paid. And that's what they should be focusing on. And unfortunately, they always cut corners and try to handle the accounting in as least expensive a way possible, and it's never done well. And they also really never do it at the true LLC level. So as Charlie said, when you get to the end of the year, a lot of these property management companies will turn over financials to you that are not even remotely close to being ready for the tax accountant to prepare the return. So you end up spending a significant amount of money to get your tax return done. And what some of my clients are finding is they pay for our services by having reduced tax preparation fees. So they get better evidence of information during the year to steer the ship, and for basically no net cost, because you get to the end of the year and their tax return fees have gone down.
I can attest to that absolutely. Compared to what I was spending in my tax accounting before working with you and what we're actually spending now, and the time spent that has been saved is absolutely so much better than it was before. It is so worth it. Now, and one thing you mentioned, Jeff, that is I think people need to understand is how you handle pretty much the holistic approach to the accounting for the property. In other words, we give you the the mortgage when we buy a property. We give you the mortgage so that you track the balances. You look at the sources and uses sheets on a closing, and you track all of that information right in your system, so that at the end of the year, it's just you push a button and my tax accountant gets exactly what he needs.
Yeah, all the acquisition accounting is done, so you have an accurate balance sheet at all times. So at any point in time, if you're out, raising money and you have investors who want to know how your property is doing, they're not only going to want to see exactly how the property is performing on an operating basis month to month, but they're also going to want to see what the balance sheet looks like. They're going to want to know the capital position, what the assets and liabilities look like on the property. So we keep that accurate at all times for you, so your investors can see the complete picture.
Yeah, and I tell you, that has just been such a blessing. I mean, what we've been through with the SEC and all of that, and you were managing all of our books for all of our properties, and they come in there and make a huge demand, and it's clearly documented that within 3 days, on all of our properties, we turned over 4,777 pages of financial information to the SEC, and they never questioned any of it, which was amazing.
I mean, that's great.
I know.
We've gone through audits, both financial audits, tax audits. I mean, we've had our clients go through every now and then go through the mill, and we always come out looking pretty good.
Yeah. So let's talk about working with you, and this big question about property management systems. I mean, you've taught me so much about different property management systems and which ones are good and which ones are bad and why they're bad. And a lot of times, the new investor doesn't know the right questions to ask when it comes to the actual computer system that the third-party property management company is using. What can you kind of give us a little bit of a background on how these things operate, why you chose the system you chose, and what have you?
Yeah. At first, a lot of people, when they're first starting out and they get their first property, let's say it's got 10 units or 15 units, whatever it is, and what they try to figure out to do is how to do it on the cheap. So they'll either try to run the property in something like QuickBooks or Quicken or something like that, or they'll try to manage it in a spreadsheet. And I mean, the bottom line is, can it be done? Yes. But you end up spending so much time as an owner trying to tweak those systems so that you can properly manage your receivables and delinquencies to see which tenants have paid rent, which ones haven't paid rent, trying to manage your lease renewals and expirations, and trying to keep proper track of your expenses. You spend so much time trying to manipulate those systems, which were not designed for property accounting, that you don't spend time doing what you should be doing, which is knocking on doors and collecting rents and making sure your tenants are happy and properly managing your vendors. And, once your property is doing well, going out and beating the bushes for new deals. And that's what you should be spending your time on, not trying to manipulate an inferior accounting system. So there are various products in the market. There are just Rent Manager,
One Site.
There's a whole bunch. One Site and then Yardi. There's a whole bunch of them out there. I happen to choose the Yardi Voyager platform. It's a very high-end system. It's designed primarily for REITs, very large organizations, and it's designed with the appropriate internal controls to satisfy a publicly traded company and proper full-blown internal controls in a large corporation, which also means that it's such a robust and in-depth system that it's virtually impossible for a small business to ever attempt to buy it or implement it. It just can't be done. So what we did is we've become specialists with the Yardi Voyager. We manage the system for you, and in my opinion, it's the Cadillac. It's the best residential property management system on the market. It gives you very in-depth information in many, many ways. There's all kinds of web access to it for you and your tenants, and it also gives the proper internal controls to make sure nobody's doing anything inappropriate. And we're able to get that system to a very small property at a very nominal rate. So that's kind of the big deal for us. So that's the system we're on, and that's why.
So when a client, one of my clients comes to you and wants to put his new property on, having you be the back shop, they get instant access to Yardi and they can look and see into the system anytime they need to?
Yes. I mean, Yardi's a platform that's completely online. It can be accessed in any operating system, whether it be Mac or PC. There are even multiple components of it that can be accessed on a smartphone or on a tablet.
Now, you talk about financial controls, and that the Yardi system gives these controls probably, as you think, better than most of these other systems. What exactly do you mean from a new property owner standpoint? What type of controls are they going to need?
Well, I mean, one of the controls that I like are you can have the complete ability to lock your property manager out of writing off rents or issuing concessions or credits to tenants without your approval. The biggest issue that I see in all my clients is delinquency and proper delinquency management. And, being able to completely control the data related to rents charged to tenants and rent payments from tenants is critical, because if you have that under complete control, then you can make sure that tenants aren't living for free, or you can also make sure that tenants aren't paying your property manager in cash and the property manager is putting the cash in his pocket. So that's sort of the biggest control is the ability to lock down the tenant side. And then on the payable side, we have to be able to have 1099 tracking properly in place. When you're going out and using vendors, you're going to want to use quality vendors who have appropriate insurance before they set foot on your property, and you want to have an accounting system that will make darn certain those people have that insurance in place before they'll even write them a check. So that's the kind of stuff. And then you also you don't want the ability for somebody to hide something that they did in a prior year or on a prior period. I mean, once you issue financials on a period, that period should be locked out. And if anything comes up, it should come up in the next period when you're focused on it, because you're not going to go back and look at something in a prior closed period. So those are sort of the big issues that I have on a control standpoint.
Let me talk a little bit about the vendor issue, because this has come up a couple times with some vendors that we were using. When I say, hey, Jeff, I got a new vendor, the guys, cuts down trees, right away you say, well, I need his 1099 and
a W-9.
The W-9 and a copy of his insurance certificate. And you set it up in the system so that I can't even tell you to pay that guy until you've got both those documents locked in the system. And the thing that gets me is the one of the things you put in there is the termination date or the effective date of his insurance policy. And when that policy is terminated or is no longer valid, if he hasn't given us a new certificate, we can't pay him. And I remember thinking, like, well, I got this guy who's been cutting down my trees, and we're running a balance with this guy. Will you pay him, please? And you come back to me and say, I can't pay him until I have his insurance certificate. Now, I can override you if I want, but that's a very good control to have, because you don't know what liability this guy's leaving out there for you, and not paying his insurance. If somebody gets hurt on the property and he's not properly insured, it's going to come back on me. So why am I paying this guy when he's got an open liability for me that I need to protect myself against?
I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, all the liability side and the insurance side is completely for you as an owner's protection.
Yep.
You just never want anybody, any subcontractor of any kind, setting foot on your property without the appropriate insurance. I mean, they could accidentally back over a child, or they could be mowing the grass and a rock could fly through a window. I mean, all kinds of strange things can happen and do happen.
Yeah.
I've seen just about all of it. And you need to have the insurance in place. You need to make sure that any claims are going against that vendor and not you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, all right, let's talk a little bit here about how you interact with third-party management companies. And let me first kind of give the listeners how it happened for me. You came to me. The timing was absolutely perfect. You came to me and said, "Listen, I'm starting this new service in Focus Property Services, and we're going to be acting as back shop for property management companies, where we will do their the accounting for the owners." And you explain how we reduce the fee to the property management company, and that pays for you right out of that fee. So it's almost a wash on the books. And I had just gone through an atrocious experience with my third-party property management company on a couple of my properties, and the accounting of the numbers, nothing made sense that they were doing. So you came to me and said, "Hey, well, I will handle the financials. Let them handle the boots on the ground type of work, and we'll just work together." And that's exactly how we started working together. And Jeff, I don't know if you remember this, but you said, within 3 months, you will be doing this yourself. You won't even use them. And what happened over that 3-month period is you started to show me stuff that they were doing that it just boggled my mind. I thought to myself, I've been letting this go on. These guys have been performing this way for me for a couple of years now. How ridiculous, because they were hiding all the numbers. So why don't you talk to us about how you initially interact with the third-party management companies if somebody wanted to use you as their accountant?
Sure. I mean, there are certain situations where you may be forced to have a third-party manager in place. One of the situations might be, if the loan that you're putting in place has a covenant that says you have to have an experienced third-party manager because this is your first property and they don't want you managing it. They want to have somebody else managing it. You might be forced to use a third-party manager. And if that's the case, the way we would work with you is we would help you try to find. I mean, you would have to try to find a third-party manager who would be okay with managing the property on the ground, handling all the interaction with tenants, handling all the interaction with vendors, being on call for work orders and things of that nature. But you tell them, you want to handle your own books, and then we handle the books for you. So, some property management companies are okay with that, some aren't. And anytime I find one who isn't, it's interesting because they usually say, well, if you're in charge of the books, how do we know you're going to pay our vendors? And our response is, well, shouldn't you be more concerned about your owner as opposed to your vendors? I mean, the property managers, they're an interesting lot because their primary allegiance is to their vendor buddies and not to you as an owner.
Yeah.
And if you start interviewing third-party managers and they start questioning why you would want someone else to handle the books, inevitably their discussion is going to come down to making sure their people are paid, and that comes more importantly than paying the rent.
Yeah, and that they get paid too.
Yeah, and that they get paid. So that's their primary concern. So, but anyway, there might be times where you have to use one, and then there would have to be a third-party manager willing to let someone else handle the accounting. Sometimes that's successful, sometimes it's not. The other situation where you'll need one is, if you're buying your first property and it's not local to you, so you can't physically manage it yourself. So you're going to have to get somebody on the ground locally. And, depending on how big the property is, if the lender requires you to have a third-party manager, you don't have a choice. But if that's not a covenant, then what you can do is you can actually start your own LLC as a property management company, and you can hire somebody to physically manage it for you on the ground. And we will work with that person to train them to use our system, train you to use the system. I mean, we have that situation in a lot of places around the country where someone's going out to buy their first property, and what they do is they hire some local person, physically put them on the payroll, and they're responsible for managing the property. And that seems to be the best way that it works. And then that enables you to expand your presence in that marketplace. You can scale that up if you've got somebody there. It works really well.
And the other thing too is, and that's exactly the way we did it. But the key thing, and this is what I didn't want to get into after having owned my own insurance business for years with scores and scores of employees, is that I didn't want to get into the payroll business. I didn't want to have to deal with payroll and having to worry about all of that. And you, in Focus Property Services, handled all of the payroll for my employees. So it was totally seamless. When I ultimately took over the third party, the property management from the third party, those employees now started working for me, and the payroll was handled all by you.
Yeah, that's correct. We handle all the payroll for all your employees, so you don't have to worry about any of that. That's the level of minutia that you as an owner would definitely not want to deal with.
Perfect. All right, so let's see what's next on the agenda here. All right, let's talk about making the break, where we go from having a third-party management company do it to taking it on ourselves. How would that transition operate?
Well, I mean, what that is that you're now responsible. You're going to be our primary point of contact for all your financial information. We're gonna make sure that you know how to read a rent roll. We're going to make sure you know how to read a delinquency report, and we're gonna talk to you about ways to manage your delinquencies and manage collections agencies if you need to, in evictions and things of that nature, and so that you know exactly the best way to use the information that we provide to you to maximize the profits on your property. And whether you are on the ground handling everything or you've got somebody working for you, we're going to be right there with you, showing you how to do it so that we can give a lot of advice on how to deal with vendors, the types of vendors to use for different situations, the type of contracts to put in place with the vendors. And there's a lot of things that happen when you take on yourself that you're going to get educated on very quickly.
So, we ended up doing it. We had, I think, when we were at the highest, we had about 6 to 8 properties that we handled. I mean, you didn't have all of our properties, only because one of our properties is a tax credit property, and the feds required a certain certification of the property management company, so we didn't even get involved in that. And I'm glad we didn't, Jeff, because I wouldn't want to have to put you through that. That was working with the government is hell. But why don't you give us some stories? Obviously, stories are the best training tools here, teaching tools. But give us some stories. Like I remember, for instance, the one time that someone stole rent money from us, and how you were able to pick up on it and you latched onto it and you quickly found out, it took us months trying to figure out where that money was and how it got stolen. And it ultimately ended up one of the women who was helping us find the money was the woman that stole it. So, when we found that out, we had to let her go. But we have never lost any rent using you. I mean, you're like a hawk on this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the biggest thing to me, the most important thing to me for an owner is to really understand your delinquency situation. And what I recommend, if you're not the one physically collecting rents and you're not, you don't have the rent checks coming to you, if you've got somebody else doing it for you, I recommend that on a monthly basis, when you see someone hasn't paid rent, I recommend that every now and then, instead of calling your property manager to say, why hasn't this person paid the rent, I recommend you call that tenant directly, and you introduce yourself. Hey, I'm Joe Smith. I own the property. We've never talked. I hope everything's going well. Hey, I noticed you haven't paid March's rent yet. Could you let me know what's going on? And every now and then that person will say, well, I gave your property manager $500 in cash 3 days ago. Didn't they tell you? And boom, it's done. It's been identified, and that's how you do it. The benefit is you're in touch with your tenants. You've talked to your tenants. Your tenants know who you are, and that's got benefits in and of itself.
Yeah.
But because you went directly to them, you were able to detect the fraud. And detecting it is, you have to have reliable accounting system in place. You have to have a delinquency report that's accurate. You have to have, going back to the beginning of this call, you have to have the quality controls in place to make sure your property manager can't go in and mysteriously remove unpaid rent from your reports so that they're real. It's all kind of circular. So that's one thing that sticks out when you call a tenant and they say, "Oh, I gave cash."
Yeah.
Not good. Not good.
No. Now, another thing that you've done for us has to do with the utility tracker. And that is a phenomenal tool. I mean, I remember you coming into the office and, hey, you got a problem on this building. And, go ahead.
The cost of one of the biggest reasons, any properties in our portfolio that have been foreclosed on in the past, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years, the common denominator on every single one of them was out of control utility costs and water costs. There was some deregulation in the water industry, I think 4 or 5 years ago nationwide that allowed a local utility company, a local, a town or a jurisdiction, whoever handles the water, they were able to segregate water from sewer. And all these towns around the country started generating their own little companies to bill for sewer, and they bill for water. And what they did was they would crank up the rates for sewer, and they would base the sewer rate on how much water you used. And it ended up causing the overall cost of water and sewer to go up 20 to 30%.
Yeah.
Throughout our portfolio around the country, and it's just nuts. And most apartment buildings are not sub-metered, so there's absolutely no possible way to know, if one unit has a leaky toilet, or if one person is just letting the tub run all night just to piss you off. There's no way to know that. So what we've developed is a tool. Every month when the water bills come in, we log in the usage of water at whatever level we're able to log it in. Whether it's at the building level, we can usually do it at the building level. Sometimes it's at the entire complex level. But then we calculate, based on the number of tenants who are there and the days that the units were occupied during the month, how much water was used. And we have some benchmarks for various markets around the country as to how much water should be used. And we're able to tell you very quickly if you've got, if it's a little over the benchmark, then we would say to you, most likely you've got a bunch of toilets that are running on all the time. So we recommend you put a maintenance plan in place to go in and start, replacing some of the flushing mechanisms in the toilets. Or, you might have some sinks that are dripping a lot. You might want to replace some of the seals. So it's cheap money to go in to do this maintenance, and it saves you a ton of money on the backside on your utility costs. Then we also know, based on these benchmarks, if there's an underground leak. I mean, we've seen this many, many times where all of a sudden a water bill will just triple one month. And when that happens, we know what's going on. There's no way that's because there's something going on in a unit. That means that, you've popped a water main somewhere under the property on your side of the meter. And if you don't figure it out very quickly, that can end up costing you thousands and thousands of dollars. Yeah. So we point that out to you as quickly as we can. And then, you go out and you hire a ground penetrating radar company to try to figure out where the leak is, and then you get it fixed. And we've seen water costs, leaks, just all kinds of things just devastate properties. So that's one of the things we do for you.
And the thing about this, Jeff, is when all the years that I used a third-party property management company to track my numbers, they never once shared with me this type of information. It's amazing.
No, it's not something they really care to do.
Yeah. Now I think
they leave it up. They leave it up to you. They're just they're gonna expect you to write a check for it, and then exactly. They're gonna leave it up to you to ask the question.
Yep. Now I think we kind of talked about this about the boots on the ground when you'd go on your own. We talked about the payroll. But you were probably having more interaction with my staff than I was on a regular basis as far as the book. So kind of give us an idea. If I have a property manager who's working for me, one of my sites, give me an idea of what you do with them and what your staff does with my employee on a regular basis.
Yeah, well, we can certainly let's walk through the whole cycle. So it starts with you've got a vacant unit, you've got an applicant who came in for that unit. So your property manager on the ground will take the application, and they'll give us all the information on the application. And we'll put that application into the system for you so that you now know that you've got a prospect looking at that tenant. Then when that tenant signs a lease, we get a copy of the lease, and then we will move that person into the system so that you now know that person's occupying the lease. Then when that person writes the rent check and gives your property manager the rent check, your property manager is going to make a copy of that rent check before they put it in the bank, and they're going to scan or fax a copy of that check to us. They're going to put it in the bank. we're going to book it in the system. And then because there's a segregation of duties there where the person on the ground is the one putting in the bank, but somebody else is reconciling the bank statement, we then have that control in place to make certain when we reconcile your bank statement at the end of the month that all the deposits are properly accounted for. So they send us the deposit, we put it in the system. Then your property manager goes out and hires a local person to cut the grass. So, and they call and say, hey, we're going to hire Joe's Landscaping Service. Are they an existing vendor in our portfolio? And we'll say, no, they're not. So you need to go get a W-9 from them, and you need to get an insurance certificate from them before you do anything else. And once you get that to us, then we'll set them up in the system, and there'll be a live vendor that you can use. Then when that person cuts the grass, that person is going to give your property manager the invoice for the work they did. The property manager is going to send it to us. We're going to put it into the system. We're then going to show an open accounts payable listing to you as the owner, and we're going to say, okay, these are the bills that have been incurred by your property manager. Are these okay to pay? And then you will say, yes, it's okay to pay these. Don't pay this one. I want to talk to my guy on the ground about it. Then once it's been approved, we turn around, we write the checks, we mail the checks out to your vendors, all done. But we have a lot of daily interaction with your property manager, both on the tenant and the vendor level. Any questions they have typically about how to deal with something on the ground, they typically call us. They don't call you as the owner. They pretty much call us. I mean, our staff is on the phone or on email with our managers around the country all the time.
Yeah, it's such a smooth process between the three different parties. It really works very nicely, very nicely. So, all right, let me ask you this, Jeff. What's the best advice you can give somebody who's just starting out?
Well, my two biggest pieces of advice, one of them I've already touched on over and over again, is delinquencies. You've got to understand your delinquencies, and you've got to manage them. They can be like a disease. If somebody starts to not pay rent and you don't act on it, and then that person's neighbor realizes that their neighbor has been living there rent-free for 2 or 3 months, they're going to stop paying rent. And then it's going to spread. And then all of a sudden you got an entire building who's not paying rent because they know that you're not going to act on it. And by that time, you're in a situation where you can't evict an entire building or you won't be able to make your mortgage payment. So you have got to understand your delinquencies. You have got to act on them within the full extent of the local law and within the full extent of your leases. You've got to deal with evictions. You can't get soft on it. If somebody doesn't pay the rent, you got to deal with it. And we will educate you on how to deal with it. It is the most important thing you will do when running an apartment complex, is staying on top of your delinquency situation. The other best piece of advice I can give out would be on the vendor side. I would recommend, very simply, and I know this is a cliche, do not be penny wise and pound foolish when it comes to vendors. Use quality vendors who do good work, who have a good reputation. They may be a little more expensive, but in the end, it is what your property is going to need. If you will have better work, you will have a better experience with your tenants having vendors on site. You will have less exposure for lawsuits. I've just seen all kinds of bad things go wrong when you try to find the cheapest guy in town, a little handyman somewhere to go out and do work for you, who doesn't have insurance and complains and moans about having to give you a 1099 because they want to get paid under the table. Those are the kinds of guys who are going to give you fits in the end and are really going to be more trouble than they're worth. So use quality vendors who have a good reputation and have no problem playing by the rules. That was my two best pieces of advice.
I'll tell you about the delinquencies, and you talk about it from a financial and accounting standpoint. I could just talk about it from a legal standpoint. That if you start treating your tenants differently because you don't have a system in place for how to deal with delinquencies, you are opening yourself up to a fair housing law violation, and you'll have even bigger problems. If you let one guy go an extra month and you haven't started the eviction process on him, but on another person you're starting the eviction process right away, that's going to be discrimination in the eyes of the Fair Housing Act, and they're going to come after you. So run your business like a business. Build systems in place so that everyone is treated exactly the same. And the thing, I agree with you, Jeff, about delinquencies. The problem with the multifamily business, and it's a business, but the problem with the multifamily business is, as an owner, you have a limited number of products that you can sell in a month. If you own a 40-unit property, you can only sell 40 products in a month. And if somebody doesn't pay you for that particular month, you're not getting that money back. You can't make it up next month with more product. You're limited. So you've got to really watch those delinquencies like a hawk. So, all right. Jeff, this is how we can get in touch with you, correct?
Yes, that's the email address to use. You can also give us a call if you'd like. Our phone number at our office is 781-934-8779. Again, that's 781-934-8779.
Great.
You could also go to our website if you'd like. It's www.infocusps.com. I will give you the disclaimer that the website was built by an accountant, so take it as such when you get there. We don't really worry about the site too much because there's really no need. It doesn't really have a use on a day-to-day basis.
It's just a finder.
But that's how you get in touch with us. So just reach out to us at any time.
All right. Jeff, I thank you so much for your time. This recording has been now updated, and it's going to be on the coaching site, and I'm going to be getting it out to my list pretty soon. So thank you very much, Jeff. I appreciate your time and everything you've done for my business.
You're very welcome. Talk to you later, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.